Okay, so welcome back to Think Differently. This week we are talking about burnout, and it's funny. A lot of my story, I talk pretty openly about the fact that I, like many people, burned out from my corporate career more than once. But what I don't think I've talked about as much is entrepreneurial burnout, which sorry to say, it's just as possible. And so that's what I really want to talk about today. I also feel that a lot of my clients either have burned out or afraid of burning out. And so, because I think a lot of people, you probably chose to start a business for one of two reasons, maybe both. The work itself sort of facilitated starting a business, right? Sort of was like, oh, I'm going to be this. I guess that means I'm starting a business. The work was driving you to say, this is the best place for me to be this type of practitioner or expert or whatever in the world. And or the lifestyle. You wanted the freedom. You wanted the flexibility to spend time with your kids, have a different kind of lifestyle, travel as you go, own your own decisions and make your own schedule, and all of those time freedom, money freedom things that I think a lot of us sort of chose as we joined entrepreneurship. And so something I've been talking about recently, because I just think it's been creeping up more and more in client conversations, more and more with colleagues as well. And I've had my own experience in almost 7 years of that feeling. I wouldn't say I've burnt out in the last 7 years, but that feeling of like, oh, something's not right. Something doesn't feel good. Whether it's from working too much or from not doing the work that you want to be doing or some other reason, and we're going to talk about that today. I'm just finding that these conversations are coming up more and more. And so part of what I want to share today is this is a normal occurrence, not to say like prophesize like you're going to burn out. No. And we can create structures and systems and processes and mindsets and strategies and ways of being in our business that either tell us when something's not right so we don't head down the path to burnout, or that keep us, really that burnout proof the business. And so if you're feeling like, oh my God, what in the world? Like, I started this business because I love the work and I wanted to have the lifestyle, and why am I burning out? Like, you're not the only one, and there's also stuff you can do about it. That's my thesis statement. So I think I named today's topic the real reasons. We're going to talk about three big ones. The real reasons that entrepreneurs burn out and what you can do about it. For those of you who are new to me, I should have started with this. My name is Laura Livingston. I am a business and mindset coach. I always see the people on the screen and just want to dive in. And I'm really passionate about working with people who are really passionate about the work itself that they're doing. And then, as I said a minute ago, they went and created a business around it. And what happens as we go along this journey? I'm fascinated by human behavior. I've always been a psychology nerd. I've used it in pretty much every aspect of work that I've had in my career. And I'm fascinated by human behavior, and I'm specifically fascinated by how we behave as humans in entrepreneurship, and then I have a background in business. And so bringing the two together, I really help my clients with both the strategy side of running a business, whether that's external or internal. We're going to talk about that a little today. And the mindset piece of just being a freaking human and all the stuff that goes on in our heads, as well as who you are from a leadership perspective and how you want to be as a business owner. So all of my work is one-on-one, with the exception of little moments like this where I have these mini master classes. I often will do longer master classes that are a little bit more workshop-y, and I do those, every few months. But all of my work otherwise is one-on-one. And to that end, if you are listening to this today and you get some ideas and you get some insights, but you want to sort of dive deeper into something specific, or if you're just not sure, my hope is that you will be able to take this and apply this to your business. I'll give you something to think differently about.
But if you're not quite sure how to apply this to your business, I have a free mini session. If you've never, this is one per person. So if you've used it, you've used it. But if you've never taken me up on this, this is something that I have offered now for quite some time. I really love doing this. It's just a great way off the back end of these calls, of these events. It's a great opportunity for you to go, okay, you talked about this and this felt right for my business, but like, this part feels sticky now. Now what do I do about it? And we can really dive into your specific business, your specific work style, what's going on for you specifically, right? Because I can only talk generally here today. And so it's a great place to really apply what you're learning. And then I also have an intensive. Those are the two easiest ways to start working with me. The free mini session is free. The intensive is $12.50, and it's 2 weeks of a deep dive into your business. So I put all the links in there in the chat. So I'm telling you that now because I always forget to put it at the end. Okay, so the first question I have for those of you who are live is I would love to know if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat. If you knew this was the topic today in advance, what drew you to today's call? If you didn't know what today's topic was, what questions do you have about burnout? What fears do you have about burnout? What experience do you have about burnout? I can try to address some of those pieces since you're live. It's really hot here. I'm turning the air down. Since you're live, you have an opportunity. Like I can talk in several different directions today. I've got 3 pieces that I want to share, but where we go specifically can depend on those of you who are live. So if you've got something that you want to share, something you want to, hoping I'm going to cover, concerns you have, feel free to put that in the chat now or anytime as we go. And then my final thing before we really jump in here is that I am not feeling well, so I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm about 50-50. I don't know. I'm too well to be on the couch, but I'm too sick to run a full day, so I'm kind of running in between. If you hear me cough or sneeze, I'm going to try to get to the mute button, but I'm just going to apologize now in advance in case I don't get there. Okay. Let's see. So, what do I want to say I might just say my first 3 things really fast. Okay, let me just check the chat because I'm seeing something. Driving but listening. Awesome. I wanted to hear how you spoke on because I personally burnt out more in this world than corporate. Yeah, thank you for saying that and for normalizing that. Because I didn't know how to set boundaries properly at the start of my business. Yeah, boundaries is a big one. Boundaries is a big one. And I again, like, please we've just got one person here saying, like, I've burned out more here than in entrepreneurship than in corporate. Let's just, again, I don't want to what's the word? Create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I feel that so much of my work is like secretly, whether my clients are aware of it or not, like I'm making sure they're not going to burn out. Because we can charge at something, right? Like even when we're excited about something, we can run more than full steam ahead for more than we have energy to do. And that doesn't mean that we're burned out. It just means we need to manage our energy and our time and all the things in our businesses. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you to this person for saying that. Okay, I wasn't aware of the topic, but often experience brilliant insight from your perspectives. Thank you. I appreciate you. Okay. So feel free to keep throwing me things in the chat, but I'm just going to go ahead and dive into. So again, what I'm going to say is these are not the only 3 things that can cause burnout. But there are 3 big things, 3 themes that I see a lot, either in clients when they first come to me, in colleagues, just in my conversations. I do a lot of networking, and so I have, a pretty decent handle on at least the people in my world, how they're feeling, how the industry is affecting them, what themes are coming up. And and frankly, these are themes that I've seen. They're not new. They're not current. They've been around for a long time. So if you are feeling, my hope is that some of this will just help you normalize that it's not just you, it's probably the situation, and there's plenty of things that you can do about it. Okay, so the first one, honestly, is like the solitude of, like, it's lonely at the top, right? Whether you're in a solopreneur model and you are the only person working in your business, or whether you have a team, however big or small your business is, even if you have other people in your business, this can be, it does not have to be, but it can be a lonely journey if you don't have the right support that matches what you need at this time, at this season, at this phase in your business. And so I want to share, was it 2 years or 3 years ago? I had a team, and I had one, like a VA for a long time, just me and one other person. And then we scaled up mainly because I had an injury and I really needed to like bring in some extra people to sort of help me do things that I couldn't do. And one of the, like, I don't think anybody talks about this, but one of the reasons that I was so excited to have a team, besides the fact that it meant my business was growing, besides the fact that it's just really nice to like offload things that are not in your zone of genius and get some help with it, right? But I was really excited because I didn't realize it at the time, but like at that point I had been in business, I don't know, 3-4 years. And I was like, yay, it'll be so fun to have coworkers again. And let me just tell you, like I had great team members, but they were not my peers. Like this sounds like Captain Obvious, but I was so excited. One of the biggest things that I miss from my corporate days, probably the only thing that I still miss from corporate, was, and if you've been in my world for a little while, you've probably heard me say this, was when we walked. I used to do consulting. I would walk into an empty conference room with people with different skill sets. We would all have specialties, and a blank whiteboard, and like a problem to solve for the client. Right? And so like I would speak about it from the change and employee perspective, and somebody else would speak about it from a systems perspective, and somebody else would own the technology. All of those really smart people going in together to solve problems was like the greatest thing. That was like the greatest joy for me in my previous career. And it's the thing I still miss, because even though I'm partnering with my clients one-on-one and I get a good chunk of that in my work, like it's still just two of us, right? It's still a one-on-one. And that ability to collaborate, talk through things, have a variety of perspectives. Yes, it's a lot of shit to navigate sometimes in politics back in corporate, but at the end of the day, you guys, like 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 1, you know, when it's the right heads and the right roles and the right butts in the right seats. And everybody's on board and, you know, all those things. There is a limit to, I think, even those of us who tend towards introversion, there is a limit to our capacity to operate in a vacuum. And when you're running a business, you need to be both the practitioner and the strategic CEO, clear-headed thinker. And half my job as a one-on-one business coach is to help my clients really hold both of those so that they can do right by their clients when they're there and do right by their business at the same time. And so the loneliness factor is real, right? People saw that across the board during the pandemic, but I think also a lot of people started businesses during the pandemic, and I think it took a couple years for that loneliness piece to kind of filter back into virtual businesses, especially into this industry. So all that is to say, sometimes and whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it doesn't matter. I am 50-50, and I find myself sort of, you know, really resonating with both groups. But I guess what I want to say here is sometimes what we just need is an outside perspective. Sometimes you're just holding too much. And so it's loneliness, but it's also the holding energetically, mentally, of all the things, the heavy, what is it? Like heavy lies the crown, like the heaviness of the responsibility of the totality of the business, right, can weigh on you. period. And I find my clients that even who have team members, if they don't have the right team members, they're still holding something, right, in their heads, in their minds, worrying about whether it got done, right, whatever it is. They're still holding it. And yes, like all work filters back up to you. You're the business owner. You're ultimately responsible, of course. That's not quite what I'm talking about here. But when you have the right team member in place and you can stop thinking about those various things because you have a person in that role that takes care of them, that can really help. Okay, so the loneliness, the responsibility piece, the holding of it all. I had a couple of thoughts in here. Okay, so first off, I think this is like kind of a hot take, unpopular opinion. You don't have to agree with me. But what I've seen is that in the short term, being a solopreneur, and I'm being very rigid with my definition here. Being a solopreneur meaning you're the only one ever doing anything in your business. For most people, maybe not even say that, for a lot of people, that model is not long-term sustainable. And so what I mean by that is if you don't have a business coach, and you can hire me, you can hire somebody else, like this isn't about that. If you don't have a business coach, if you don't have a VA, if you don't have a consultant that you reach out to periodically to check in and say like, hey, I want to walk you through my strategy for the next 3 to 6 months and see if you have any other ideas, right? Like it could be that simple. So I'm not saying you have to have some big, huge team, but some amount of support at some point during the year, because otherwise you start to operate in a vacuum. And so again, I'm not speaking for all people. I have lots of clients who are in the solopreneur model, and I'm not suggesting that you need to hurry up and scale out of that. I'm not suggesting any level of that. And if you're starting to burn out, you might be holding too much. That might be the simple reason. And so maybe you don't have the capacity or the finances to invest in team members, but maybe you need to go find somebody that can be your biz bestie, right? Your colleague, somebody you can check in with every now and then, right? Like that's free, right? Maybe your partner has some sort of entrepreneurial background and you can have like, I don't know, monthly meetings with them, right? Like we can create that support across the board. And I want to remind you that you already have support and friends and family members and friends of friends, people that you can bounce ideas off of, right? You don't have to hire somebody for that necessarily. So I do think that if you have been a solopreneur for a long time, this could be one of those like, oh, okay, I'm probably just doing too much of it myself. And whether that's very direct and obvious, like delegating to a team member, that's one thing, or bringing on a coach or a consultant to support you in that sort of strategic thinking process, so that you're like, yeah, I had this idea, but now I'm kind of doubting myself, or I had this idea, but I might be doing too much. I need somebody else's brain on this business, right? Again, there's lots of different ways you can slice that. But the answer to this one is like, what's the answer? Get some support. Choose your own adventure. Find your way. You probably already have support that you can leverage. So that's number one. The solopreneur model could be sort of underneath your holding of the responsibility and your loneliness, if you will. Number two, under this loneliness piece, a couple other thoughts here. I think at the end of the day, like a lot of times my clients will, when they come to me, they have a very clear thing they want to change in their business, whether it's, growing and scaling, or whether it's shifting and pivoting, or whether it's just like getting sort of the business itself running a little bit more smoothly, so that you can have more white space, delegate better, run your team better, whatever's going on behind the scenes internally in the business. But I think if I'm really honest, the main reason most of my clients renew to work with me I have a 6-month program. Most of them work with me for at least a year. I think the reason people stick with me, and frankly, the reason that I keep hiring my coach again, is because it just feels good to have support of somebody that knows you, that knows your business. And that can be like, hey, remember when we did this last year? You didn't like it. Has something changed? You know what I mean? Like to just call you on things and to point out and to remember your past and to remember your style and to remember what works for you. Because being alone in it all, it's probably the thing, honestly, for me, that fatigues me the most. And it's, I took a year and a half off from having my own business coach for 87 reasons. I'm not saying you always need to have a coach. I'm a great example of that. I have most of the time had a coach. But I came back and rehired my forever coach in the spring. And I gotta tell you, day one, we accomplished nothing. Let me say this differently. Day one, before we accomplished anything, those first 5 minutes of having a session with her, I was like, oh my God, I needed this. Oh, I feel better. And things weren't bad, things weren't wrong, nothing, like I didn't have a specific mega problem going on. I was just ready to have support again. I'm tired of feeling by myself in this business. So I just really want to normalize that. And then we already talked about more heads are better than one. Everybody has a different perspective. And this isn't about, you can get too many perspectives, right? So if you're the kind of person that tends to ask 18 different people their opinion before you make a decision, like maybe this advice one isn't for you. But for those of my high achievers, takes one to know one. I am fiercely independent, but that's one of my superpowers, but it's also like the thing that can drag me down because I will be independent to a fault. It's okay. I don't need anybody. Right? And those of you who resonate with that, more heads are better than one. It doesn't matter how great you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how much you got it and how much you don't want to ask for help. When you ask for help, it creates relief. And if you're feeling like you're on the path to burnout, or if you want to burnout proof your business now, it's an ongoing practice, P.S. Making sure you have support, whatever support means. Having a therapist, right? A lot of my clients have therapists. Whatever your support is needed, whatever you need in terms of support, that could be the difference between you burning out and not burning out. Okay. I think I've beat that drum to death. Any questions on the loneliness and the holding the responsibility? Let me just check the chat here. Okay. So that was number one. Number two, there's a reason this is a major component in my coaching framework. I call it strategic action because I find that, how do I want to say this? Having a great strategy doesn't matter if you can't execute it. And I find that, it's that very generic but still very true, like 80-20 rule. When you don't know what actions your results come from, you're just going to be running around doing 100 things. And if you can work on the 20% of the actions that create 80% of your results, you are efficient, and you are taking strategic action. That's just a very simple example of what I mean by strategic action, but I'm going to give you a couple of examples. What I find is, so maybe you're burning out because you're feeling lonely. And it could be all three of these, and it could be something else, right? These are just the three that, for me, rise to the surface at the moment. You could also be burning out because you're trying to do too much. I think that overworking
is the obvious reason for burnout. But again, that's why I started with loneliness, because that's a mindset piece and that's a human piece of it, that's not practical or maybe not obvious on the surface, but it's a huge piece. And it's also why I think a lot of people burn out and they don't see it coming or they don't know it, because they're just like, well, what? Solopreneurship, it's a thing. And we're all supposed to, sorry, I'm like getting all excited. We're all supposed to be doing this by ourselves. And we're not supposed to, like all these people are doing it. Why can't I? It can be lonely, right? And so I think from a strategy perspective, if you're doing too much, that's a little bit more obvious. But I also find that sometimes doing too much doesn't actually on the outside look like doing too much. So sometimes doing too much is, I have this many clients, I have a team that I'm managing, I have a podcast, this isn't me, I'm making this up. I have a podcast, I have a YouTube channel, I'm on Instagram stories every day, I run a mastermind, I have too many things going on and my calendar is just squished full and I'm always behind on projects. My team is always waiting for something from me. If you're a service provider, this is a really great one. This is a really common one. My clients are waiting on stuff from me. I owe things to my clients. I'm late on deliverables. It's because your calendar is too full, because you're doing too many things. So I think that's the more obvious. I think most people know they're burning out when that's the case. They're like, okay, I'm just working too many hours. But you can also burn out on the other end of that if you don't know what strategy and what action creates the best results in your business. And so you kind of I don't know, maybe I'll just do some stuff here on Instagram. Okay, I put out 6 posts, nothing happened. It felt kind of weird and awkward. Maybe that's not right for me. Okay, maybe I'll just go over here, right? And so that's a very different version because nobody else is going to see that necessarily on the outside, but you on the inside are doing a lot without doing a lot, right? Doing a lot without anything to show for it. And I don't mean business results. I mean traction, business results in form of clients. I mean the traction component of putting your marketing out or whatever it is that you're doing. So a couple of pieces under strategic action, little pieces that I see happen a lot. You might be, I started sort of just alluded to this, but if you choose a strategy and you don't give it enough time, current wisdom is 90 days minimum. I'm seeing more 90 to 3 to 6 months, depending on the strategy, depending on the business. And I mean, other things are happening much faster. So you never know how long something's going to take. But when you create a new strategy, I'm going to pick a new platform or start actually doing social media or add a podcast on top of my social media. That's a really common one. And then I don't have a lot of downloads and I don't have a lot of people after the first 3 episodes. So I think I'm just going to quit, right? Most of the time it takes longer to generate results and following and to work a strategy than we think it does. And that will burn you out faster than anything I've ever seen. Because even if you're working a regular amount of hours per week and you're not overworked, the constant starting over, back to the drawing board, trying something else, the mindset and the energy, so that's the practical, but the mindset and the energy behind that of just full on throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping, that's not a business strategy and that will wear you out. That will wear you out. And then on the other end of that, right, okay, fine, I'm gonna pick and stick and I'm just gonna put on earmuffs and put on blinders and go forward and never look at how my industry's changing over time, never talk to my audience and receive market research or any kind of feedback on what I'm providing, right? And it can be as simple as me today saying, give me your questions, right? This gives me market research when I interact with you to see if what I'm saying is resonating and what your questions are, right? Somebody asked a question here that I don't answer today. I'm probably going to create a piece of content around that. I'm probably going to create another thing differently about that, right? So, I mean, it can be that simple. It doesn't have to be some complicated market research. But if I'm so blind to any interactions with my clients, customers, audience, industry, that'll also burn you out because you're just like, you're never going to be able to iterate and evolve over time. And then being inefficient behind the scenes. This is the other strategic action piece that I see a lot. So we just talked about a couple pieces, right? From a strategy, like more external strategy, marketing strategy, how you do your business, what your offers, how your offers look, how you operate with your customers. But internally, how are you spending your time? When you sit down to get client work done or to write a piece of content or whatever it is that you're doing, is that, you don't need to be like super productive person, but like, are you being efficient? Do you know what to work on? Are you spending a lot of time at the beginning of every week or the beginning of every day trying to figure out what in the hell to work on first? Do you have processes behind the scenes, right? Like, I had a discovery call yesterday. I was not feeling well. I was so grateful to myself that I have a link, what do you call it? Like a template in my emails. Of course, I sent the person a follow-up email that was specific to them at the top. And then I said, as a reminder, as we discussed below are the details for my program. And I just copy paste that shit because they don't need that. I don't need to rewrite that every single time, right? I can both write a personal email to them and have processes that support me behind the scenes. And it was so much easier because I was really tired and I was able to follow up with them that same day. Whereas I otherwise probably wouldn't. I probably didn't have the energy to write all of that out in one fell swoop. Processes, having role clarity with your team, the way you spend your time, all of those things can be a burnout factor if you're not operating efficiently. And then finally, and I should have maybe said this first, the under strategic action, the way that I see most people burn out is they do not set priorities. And then even if they set priorities, they don't act according to their priorities. If everything in your business is important, and everything in your business is important, but one of the first things I do when I work with a new client, if they haven't already done this, is I ask them to force rank their top 3 priorities in their business above everything else. After you being a human and like having a life and stuff like that. But like in terms of the business itself and how work gets done and what you want to accomplish, we force rank those because everything has trade-offs and everything cannot be important. Everything cannot be important. 8 things cannot be the most important 8 things. They just can't, right? And if we have, and I really hate 3, honestly, I really prefer 2. I know people out there that really say, it's only 1. But my definition of like how we define those are different. That's for a topic for another day. But if you don't have priorities, then yeah, when you sit down to do your job tomorrow morning, you probably don't know which thing to start working on because you don't have any priorities, right? Your priorities not only tell your team what's most important, saves you decision making there. It tells you what's most important. When things do compete, because competing priorities are a part of life and very much a part of business, you already ranked them and you already know. And of course, you can always make a different decision. Like it doesn't have to be so rigid, but it removes decision fatigue, which I maybe could have added as my number 4. It's one of the other, today we're only talking about 3, but decision fatigue is real. And that's why I'm going back to number 2 being this broader bucket of strategic action. Because when you have priorities, when you've set a strategy and you've tested it and you know what works and you know how to iterate and refine it as you go, like you've just made 90 million decisions that you don't need to now make in the future. I think that's a huge one. Okay. Questions, comments, etc. Oh, and then the other piece that we were talking about teams. This is just a side note, but I made a note about it. I think the other piece when you're looking at your team is delegating the stuff that you're the worst at first.
will relieve so much that you can't even see. I have had clients that when they finally hired a VA, when they finally hired an OBM, when they finally hired, I'm trying to think, who did she hire? A copywriter. They were feeling like one of their clients wasn't aligned anymore, and like maybe in the future they were going to wrap up their work together. But they relieved their stress inside the business, internal to the business, by delegating something that was draining them because they weren't good at it. Because you can't be good at everything, even if you wear every hat in your business, right? And we can't always do this, right? That's why, back to my like number piece about solopreneur model, but she was feeling like, ugh, I just feel drained when I work with this one client. And when she delegated that, it took a minute. She was like, I just like, my stress level is so much like, I don't have the stress that I used to. And I'm actually like enjoying working with this client again, right? Like the problem wasn't with that client. The problem was she was just maxed out with stress in ways that we don't always know where the source is. And so when she was kind of back to her regular operational self, there was nothing wrong with her and the client. She had capacity at that point. Okay, the final piece is having a clear vision. This is another element of my coaching framework, is having a clear vision, strategic action, mindset, and evolving along the way, which builds adaptability and resilience. So the clear vision piece, I find, is another place. I could have talked about every single element of my framework today, but I think, these are the top three that just can't seem to rise to the top for me. Not having a clear vision. How are you going to put a good strategy together if you don't have a good vision, right? Like, if you don't know where you're going, and okay, that I just like Captain Obvious what I just said. But how I see this playing out in the conversations I'm having with people is less about, I don't know where I'm going. Most of you, like, we all have, like, we set out to start this business. We know who we want to serve for the most part. Like, we might iterate and change that as we go. But, like, for the most part, this is what I'm doing. This is who I'm serving. Like, we can change those things. But when, how do I want to say this? When, a couple of things. One, when that vision changes, or when that vision feels less exciting or less interesting to you over the years, that alone can spin you out. Just like my example of my client who finally delegated and was like, oh, there's no problem with my client. That was the source, right? This is one of the things that I did all through my consulting career, and one of my favorite things to do with new clients especially is like, what is the source of the problem? Your symptom is burnout, right? But what's underneath? That's what we're talking about today. Some places where you might find what's underneath. And when you shift creatively, right? I've been in business almost 7 years, and I've had at least 3 iterations that I can think about really clearly in this work. Or over the last 7 years, right? 3 kind of different iterations of my business. Sometimes I was just like, oh, I feel like I want to change my audience a little bit. Okay, I did. Done. No big deal. Not dramatic. Not existential. But I've had other changes where I was like, I don't think I want to sign that new client because not just they don't feel right, but like the type of client that I'm speaking to now doesn't feel right. Oh, crap. Who do I want to work with? I had another friend of mine, we were talking recently, and she said, I want to do something different, but I don't, in my business, like the work itself, but I don't know what that is. And that I don't know is keeping me up at night. And getting back to having a clear vision. Again, your vision can change over time. I'm not saying it needs to be rigid, but when things don't feel right, it may simply be that you just need to change your vision and spend some time. One of the things I always recommend to my clients who feel like once they're aware, like, oh, okay, something's transitioning, I'm pivoting, something's changing, even if it's a small change, is to dedicate some quiet white space time, and for sure some sessions with your coach if you have one, to speak about that topic. Like, treat that pivot like a project itself, because it is. That was my former career, was change me. Any type of, I would come in for projects where the business was making changes. That's my prior area of expertise. And of course it plays out here. But if we're treating the change like a project, because it is, then we're more likely to figure it out sooner. And just knowing that, like, oh, am I pivoting? Even asking yourself that question, you might come back to the same answer. But maybe this conversation for you goes, oh, okay, my problem isn't in a vision. I got the vision. Vision is clear. Check. Great, let me look at my strategy. Great, let me look at how I can get some more support, and let me think about if I'm lonely, right? Like, it's about finding the areas, having the awareness, finding the areas that you can look at. And so if you are shifting creatively, giving yourself the white space to ponder that and to think through what is changing, what isn't changing, what feels right, what doesn't feel right, can help you start to get clarity and traction towards what you do want, even when you don't know. One of the things I constantly say for my clients when they say they don't know is, I'm like, okay, well, what do you know? Right? Let's just put a list of things together that we already know work and are good, so that we don't need to touch them because they're working and they're great. And then we're left with just a few other pieces to look at usually, right? It's probably not all elements of your business that isn't working. Or excuse me, that you feel like is changing your vision. There's a million things I could say about vision. One other piece about vision when you feel like it's shifting, and that is back to number 2, strategic action. One of the best ways I know to solve the I don't know-ness, when you're just like, something's got to change, I just don't know what it is. One of the best ways I know is to find a thing that you can test, a small set of actions that you can do and test and play and experiment to see if that gets you the clarity. So as much as I just said, make sure you have white space and make sure you talk about this with your coach, sometimes we cannot just figure it all out by thinking about it. We have to take some action. And action, absolutely, I truly believe this, action breeds clarity. Action helps us create clarity. We also need some white space to think about it, right? So if you can find a baby step action, right? If you're like, I always give this example because I work with a lot of service providers, web designers, copywriters, VAs, etc. And a lot of my web designers and copywriters, like they generally have strong opinions at any point in time in their career around, are they just web designers or do they also want to write the copy for their clients, right? Or are they just copywriters and they do not also want to do web design? Or maybe they enjoy doing both. That decision, I've seen people change that decision back and forth all over the years as they've shifted and evolved, and that's not wrong. I think that's just the nature of some of that work, especially if you have both skill sets. But let's say you're a web designer and you're thinking you might want to write some copy. Can you take an existing client that knows you and loves you and offer to write their copy for a low price for a small project and see how you feel about it before you run off and add 47 new pages to your website about how you're now a copywriter too, and then your audience gets confused, and right? You can do both, but to give you that information is gold. And then if you really are pivoting, then you're doing it from a place of strategic action instead of, I don't know what's wrong, I don't have a clear vision anymore, so I'm just gonna be a website designer and a copywriter, right? And I laugh because we all have done this. Like, I'm not making this up. This is something a lot of us have done. And it just can be, if we can just make the change smaller to start to give you the information, to take the action, to start to test it out, it can just be easier. Because then when you are clear, oh yeah, I freaking love this copywriting.
But you know what? I know that now I want to write only for these people. Okay, great. Then maybe that's a back pocket offer for the clients that you really appreciate, like that you know, really know their industry or something. Okay. I hope this was valuable. I hope this made you think differently. I hope if you have had seasons of burnout that maybe this gives you a little bit of hindsight as to why. I hope that if you're feeling burned out in the future, you will hold on to this recording and use it. And I hope that if you're feeling it now, that this gave you at least something to say, okay, it's not that, right? So maybe it is this, right? Awareness is huge when it comes to burnout. And if we are burning out, it also generally means that we're not operating at 100%. So that makes it even harder to have the clarity around what's actually causing the problem. And so if you can just go through methodically, like, what do I know? What do I enjoy? What is working? What does feel okay? What doesn't feel okay? Right? If it's obvious, like your calendar, okay, you've got some trade-offs and priorities to change around so that you can have a more spacious calendar, right? If it's the work itself, it's looking at the vision, right? All the things that we talked about today. But my hope is that this will give you something to noodle on. And if you want to have a conversation with me about your specific business, that's literally what I do all day, every day. Is I love the one-on-one. These are hard for me because I have to think all very generally and think of all kinds of different examples. So feel free to take me up. The link is in the chat, and it'll also be in the email that I'm going to send you later today with the recording. Feel free to take me up on a free mini session. It's 30 minutes. You'll be shocked at what we can accomplish there to get you some clarity around what's going on. Or we can customize an intensive for you as well. Are there any questions, insights, comments, requests for topics next time before we go? I'm just going to check the chat here. Thank you. You're welcome. This was interesting, so thank you. Okay, you're so welcome. If anything sparks for you later, feel free to just reply to the email. You're welcome, and thank you for being here. This is so much fun for me. I love to interact with you. I used to do a Facebook Live in my Facebook group back when I used to have one years ago, and that was always one of my favorite things to do, but I never got that interaction, that we have here. So thank you for being here. What am I talking? Oh, next week is my 7-year business anniversary. So I'm doing 7 things that, I think it's like the top 7 things that I've learned in the last 7 years. So feel free to sign up for that if you can't make it live. Yes, there will be, thank you. If you can't make it live, there will be a recording, so you can sign up for it and the recording will come to you automatically. Thank you. You've given me so much to think about and where changes are needed. Awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, my friends, I will see you next week. Have a great one. I'm going to go take a nap. Bye.